Great. So welcome everyone to our monthly mySpeakerBusiness community call. Well, as you all know, on these calls you get practical hints and tips from our guest experts that you can apply right away in your own business. You can ask your own personal questions on how to make your speaker business flourish further. It's a space where you can exchange with other professional speakers and get help and support from others on your own high priority projects. If you have anything that you would like to share at the end of the call, it's time for that. And then also simply take a break and have fun with us. As you all know, this is an interactive call, so we put on this show for you, and it's not a show, it's really like a time for you to ask your questions. So whenever you have any questions, put them into the chat and we'll, keep an eye on them and answer them. And also we have time at the end of the call to really do a deep dive with you on anything you would like to know more about our topic today. Also mute yourself when you're not speaking, so we have a sparkling recording. And so let's jump right into it. Our topic today is your breakthrough book, how to write a book that matters. Well, I guess all of you are here because either you have been thinking about writing a book and you're probably wanting to do it because you want to uplift your authority, your reputation, and your visibility. Well, many experts that I know say that their first book has really been a breakthrough for them in so many ways, as speakers, as experts, as entrepreneurs, and so on. Well, maybe you think about writing and publishing your first book and you just want to get some hints on how to get going with it. Or maybe you have your book out, or maybe several already, but they don't really fly and you want to get some hints on that. Or maybe you already have successful books out there and you really want to know how to make it faster and easier to write, publish, and market books in the most powerful ways. Well, wherever you are with your books right now, I'd say you are on the perfect call with us because, I've invited a great friend of mine who is an expert on writing and publishing. Well, our precious guest today will share her personal experiences and give great hints and tips on why a strong book is really essential for you as a speaker today. We'll talk about what are the 5 mistakes that you should avoid when you're creating your own book to not even damage your reputation. We'll talk about how your books make your clients even better clients, which I find an intriguing, really exciting topic to talk about. And we'll also talk about 7 ways to monetize your book and many other things. Well, before we jump into it, let me introduce our precious guest today a little bit. She is the author of 4 books and the CEO of Dudley Court Press. She's a frequent speaker, so she's not only a publishing expert, but she's also a frequent speaker and presenter at industry conferences. She has an MBA from the Yale University, and she also speaks regularly as an instructor at several universities on a regular basis. And she's a real global lady, I would say, because she has lived and resided in France, Mexico, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Brazil, and traveled 22 other countries. Well, now I know she lives in Arizona. Well, and she's saying about herself where she's learning to love the javelinas, or at least coexist with them. Well, you're going to tell us all about them in a second, I guess, because I have no clue what javelinas are, to be honest. Well, Gail, it's really an honor and pleasure to have you with us today. I know it's the morning, so thanks for getting up early for us to be here with us today. Well, I'd say the floor is all yours. Why don't you tell us, how did you get into speaking? How did you get into publishing? And then share with us what we should do when we want to write, publish, and market our next book in the most powerful ways. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Monique. It's really a delight to be here with all of you today. And I should have put a picture of a javelina in my presentation, but I didn't. I'll have to find one and send it to you. But I got into publishing because I did what a lot of you are talking about doing. I know I kind of had a life, and then I had an impulse to write a book, and I did. And as I was writing the book, I looked around to see which New York publisher was going to be lucky enough to get me as a client. I was fortunate to have an opportunity to speak with a literary agent early on in my process. And she was very kind and told me in a lovely way that there was no way any New York publisher was ever, ever, ever going to publish my book. That was a wake-up call about the realities of the publishing world. And so I started looking at self-publishing, and I really didn't like what I saw. I found the quality of books in the self-publishing world, I just didn't want to be associated with them. And so I did what anyone strategically thinking about how to place themselves, how to market themselves would do. I created a company to publish my book. Now, I don't talk about that in this presentation, but so this is a little extra bonus for you. If you are thinking about self-publishing your book, start a little imprint. You don't need a license for it. You don't need any education. You don't need anything other than to decide to create a publishing imprint. If you publish on CreateSpace, you don't need a company or anything. Just make up a name. That name, that imprint, that publishing entity then owns the ISBN that identifies your book. I'm getting kind of technical here, but if you're going to write a book, you need to know this stuff. So, but the reason is you immediately put some distance between you as the author and you as the person who published the book, and to the world. As long as your imprint is not your name or something that's closely identified with you, there appears to be some publishing entity decided that your book was good enough to publish, and that places you in an entirely different quality level from the world of self-published books. So it's a tiny little marketing thing that you can do that makes a huge difference if you do it right. So anyway, that's what I did. I started Dudley Court Press. I published my first book, which was a book on how to live a joyful life. And then I realized I needed to make a choice. I needed to pursue the business of being a coach and speaker about living a joyful life, or I could become a publisher. And because what was happening, friends asked me to help them publish their books, and I discovered I really loved the publishing business and the activity of publishing. And I decided I didn't want to build a business about how to live a joyful life. I just figured, I wrote the book, it's out there. If anybody wants to know the rules about living a joyful life, it's all in the book. So I became a publisher, and for several years, I ran the business as a hobby, working with friends and doing I really learned the ropes on a lot of friends' books, and then decided to make it into a commercial enterprise, maybe 5 years into it. So about 5 years ago, I guess, because we're now 10 years old. And since then, we've published over 30 books, and we have a couple of award winners, and we have we're having a lot of fun with it. So I'm right now, what we call ourselves, or what we are, is a contemporary hybrid publishing company, and we help thoughtful people write their books and become successful published authors. That's my mission. So today what we're going to talk about is your breakout book, the book that's going to catapult you to a new level as a speaker. I first want to distinguish between two kinds of books. Let me see if I can find my little, sorry about this, that's me. Okay, so then we go on to, I want to there are two kinds of books that you might be thinking about. One is commonly called a lead generation book, and it's maybe a 50, 60-page book. So it could be up to 100 pages, but anywhere between 40 to 60 pages is pretty standard for a lead generation book. And then there are substantive books, which are going to be 150, 200 to 250 pages, something like that. Those are very different kinds of books, but both work for you as a speaker. But it depends on your business, what you're trying to accomplish, and where you are in your career. So I'm going to speak to both of those a little bit today, but just be aware that there are differences, and you really want to start by thinking about which kind of book are you thinking about writing. I'm going to refer to both of these as lead generation books because I do, but I make, just so you know that I'm speaking, unless I'm specific about one type or the other, I'm talking about both of these kinds of books. I think today that there are too many lead generation books that are being written that are mostly junk because somebody's been told they need to write a book, and people write and publish really terrible books that undermine them as speakers. So I'm going to encourage you not to do that. We'll get into that a little bit more. And sometimes you'll find these 200-page books that should have been a 50-page white paper rather than a book. And there's 150 pages of fluff in them. They don't, I mean, they do serve some purpose, but it doesn't take a lot to increase the value of a book. If you're going to do it right. That's my attitude about all of this. So I think it's important to create a book that actually matters. Some people have been touting books as the new business card for a decade or more. And, everybody who's looking for clients is being told to write a book. I think that, again, if you're going to write a book, you need to think about it. It's a marketing asset for you. Now, you wouldn't do a brochure that's filled with grammatical errors and spelling mistakes. So why do a book that way? And I can't tell you how many self-published books have all kinds of errors in them that are just appalling. Don't do that, please. I also think that if you're going to make the effort to do a book, make it something that's of value to your clients, it's not just a pretty brochure. If you provide value, it multiplies the benefits to you. So can anything good come from these lead generation books? I think if you serve your prospects and clients with a lead generation book that matters, it can be the beginning of a beautiful relationship. When you put the effort in to create a lead gen book that matters, your prospects are going to respond. They know when they look at your book, if it fills a need that they didn't know that they had, or opens their eyes to questions that they didn't even know they should ask. That kind of lead gen book establishes the credibility and trust that you want to create with your prospects and clients. So what you're going to discover in this presentation are two benefits to you in terms of writing a good lead generation book, 6 ways to create content. I think you're going to like some of these. 5 mistakes to avoid, and 7 ways to earn money with your book. So the 2 benefits to you that I see when you write a lead generation book that matters: an educated prospect becomes a better client. At the very least, I know from my own experience that folks coming to me for help with their books have an intensive educational process ahead of them. And the earlier on in the process that they realize that, the better equipped they are to make it through the demanding process of writing and publishing a book. So if I can educate people early on, and I'm going to tell you what I've done to do that, they become better clients for me because they're raised up and are able to walk the path on their own instead of having me have to carry them all the way. The other benefit in having a lead generation book for you relates directly to the fact that everybody is never your market. Now, you all know that, but a lead generation book serves the self-selection process. People can figure out for themselves that they are not your client, or that you are absolutely the person to help them. So the right lead gen book helps attract and repel the right people. So you're not wasting your time with a lot of people who will never really be your ideal client. and you are attracting, strengthening the relationship with those who will be. So let me give you some ideas for how to write a book that matters. It's not as hard as you might think. It's very exciting to hear that so many of you are working on your books, or planning to, or in the process of doing it. For many of you, the 40 to 60 page book is going to work just fine. But again, it depends on your market and your business. You have to decide, what works for you in the marketplace that you are operating in. Let me give you some ideas for possible content for your lead generation book. First of all, your process or your system. If you run a business and have a proprietary process that you teach to other people, then that process provides brilliant content for your book. Here's an example. Hopefully yes, it did come through. This is the cover file to a little book that I wrote earlier this year called Steps to Publishing a Book. And I'll be able to show you the whole book when I stop sharing my screen. But this was a book I put together as a lead generation book. It's only 32 pages, and it's it's index card size. So it's 3.5 inches by 5 inches. And what you're seeing is the full cover. So there's on the right is the front cover. In the middle is the back cover. And then on the left is my business card, which is a perforated addition to the cover that folds in on the back cover. It's a very clever design. And I was at a business conference not too long ago, and I was swamped with requests for this. I passed out 100 copies of it, and people came up to me over and over again saying how much they appreciated the book. It gave them so much useful information. It basically outlines our successful author system. And the thing is that all of the information in there is what I want someone to understand before they talk to me, because otherwise I have to say it all to them. So it's information that I want them to know. And if they can get it by reading this little book, it saves us both a lot of time. It's very basic information, but it makes somebody a better prospect because they're more educated about my business. So what else can you use for content besides your business system, which I've shown you here? Let's see. Sorry, I had a little technology issue this morning, and all my photos from this presentation disappeared, and I didn't have a chance to pull the cover up to this book, but there should be a book cover there. And the book is called An Insider's View of Bipolar Disorder. And this is a book of questions. The Q&A format is essentially a book of 20 questions. It's a way that I helped Dr. Golden do his first book. Let me just tell you about it. He came to us with a memoir. He's a physician who had retired and wrote his memoir. And when I asked him why he was bothering to write a memoir, he told me that he thought if somebody found his book on the shelf at Barnes & Noble and they read it and it helped them, he'd be very happy. Now, his book tells his story of being a medical doctor with bipolar disorder. He was diagnosed when he was in medical school. So I understood his desire to help people, but I had to tell him that the only way his memoir was going to end up on the shelf at Barnes & Noble was if he snuck in and put it there. It was not a book that Barnes & Noble would ever buy. And for those of you not in the US, Barnes & Noble is a major book-selling chain here in the United States. But his book was not a book that a bookstore would buy. So we got past that, but it opened the door to why did he want to continue to help people? He was now retired, and what was it that was feeding that desire to help people, or causing that desire to help people? And he said, well, I just want a way to help people, remove the stigma from mental illness and things like that. And so I asked him if he'd ever thought about being a speaker. or an advocate or something like that. And it had never crossed his mind. And we talked about that possibility. He got very excited about being out talking to people. And I said, the thing that you need, and Doug, if you're still here, I know you talked about bullying and suicide. There's a link here. And this could work well for you. I said, you need a book that establishes you as an expert on bipolar disorder, not as a medical expert, because he was a nephrologist, but he was certainly an expert as someone who lived with bipolar disorder and had a successful career. So we put together a short book called An Insider's View of Bipolar Disorder. And it was essentially 20 questions. I challenged him to come up with the 20 questions people do ask or should ask about bipolar disorder or about living with someone with bipolar disorder. So he came up with the questions, and then he wrote the answers. And that was his book. And it served him, it still serves him as an entree into media, into event planners. They hire him. He's having a wonderful time speaking, and he's become a known advocate for folks with mental health issues. And by the way, we published his memoir a year after we published his first book. And now when he speaks, he has 2 books at the back of the room that he sells. He's written a 3rd book as well. He started off with this simple approach, which is to list the frequently asked questions or should ask questions that your client base asks or should ask, and then answer those in a book. Great way to create content. You can also pick, say, the top 10 issues that common conditions or situations that you address in your practice. This lets your prospects know that they're not alone and that you have lots of experience dealing with these conditions or situations. You can use this approach to create a short book, or you can also create a substantive book with it. I hope the next, I'm going to jump ahead. There we go. I had slides mixed up here. This is a great example of what I mean by this. Lee Albert is a massage therapist. And 6 or 7 years ago, I encouraged him to write a book because he treated me for some chronic hip pain. And in 2 minutes, he basically cured pain that had bothered me for 15 years. I asked him to please write a book. He finally said he would. He had been encouraged by many people to write a book, though he isn't a writer. But he said, I don't even know how to begin. And we used this approach. I said, tell me what the top conditions are that you see people for. So that was easy because he did what he did every day, and he listed the top 12 or 13 conditions, I think it was. And then he knew all the material. He didn't have to research anything. He didn't have to think about anything because this is what he did day after day. So we just organized it with the 13 top conditions. He created a diagnostic tool for each, which he used all the time. So this was not anything he knew. And then a treatment plan for each. And he wrote the book. It was first published in 2012. It's been a bestseller on Amazon and at Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health in Massachusetts in the US, where he works. We just published a 2nd edition, this one here, in 2018. And this book, along with one of his other books, or his other book called Yoga for Pain Relief, are both featured on a public television special called Survival Guide for Pain-Free Living in the US on our public broadcasting system programs. And the companion book, Yoga for Pain Relief, just won a big award in the US, a Ben Franklin Award for the best book in 2018 for health and wellness. And he's not a writer. And he just wrote what he did. Now, this was a substantive book. This is maybe around 200 pages or something. I'm going to go back because another possibility is the steps that people have to take. If you think about what steps you take people through as you take them on their process, that's another way to create content. It's a little bit like my steps to publishing a book. But maybe just the first 5 steps somebody has to take in order to move from where they are down the road through the process that you help them with. A friend of mine is a speech therapist, and her book is entitled something like this. It's Your Child Needs a Speech Therapist. What do you do next? And she markets that book through pediatrician offices, schools, so that when parents are told that their child needs a speech therapist, they get this little booklet. It's more than a brochure, it's a book, but it establishes her as an expert, and it tells people, what the first few steps are. Very valuable way to establish yourself as an expert. Another possibility is just to take the content of the transcript of the interview that Oprah just did with you, right? Didn't you all just do for anybody who's had an interview with Oprah or anybody else, take the interview content and use that as your content. Or you can actually take the content from any of the other things I've talked about. I don't think I talked about blog posts. Yeah, I didn't. That was one of the slides that dropped out. But blog posts are another source of content. The thing about using your blog post, though, is it's important not to just grab a random selection of blog posts. You have to create some kind of context and then rework the blog posts into your larger manuscript. So have it make sense. Don't just throw things together. But you can also take any of this material and create it in a Q&A format. That's such a great way to provide information to people at an early stage in your process. And it's an easy way for you to put together content. Now I want to turn to some things that you shouldn't do when you're creating your lead generation book. So the 5 mistakes to avoid include selling or pitching too hard. Don't overdo it. I mean, this is a marketing tool for sure, but you want to provide value and some calls to action. But make sure you have lots and lots of value and not too many calls to action, because you don't want to tip the balance there. You can be subtle and you can be bold. You can have actual advertisements in your book, but you don't want it to be all promo for you. You want to give people value. Mistake number 2 is not pitching or selling at all. Don't make that mistake. And make sure that you use your lead generation or breakthrough book as a marketing tool. So you have to find some balance in there. Excuse me. The 3rd mistake is to provide all kinds of answers. That's not what you want to do in a short lead gen book. This is where you don't do the coaching here or show people how to fix the problems in great detail. You use the lead generation book to point out the issues or problems or challenges that your customers face, and then emphasize the importance of addressing those problems. Of course, with your help is the smartest way to go. In a substantive book, though, I mean, when you're getting up into the 200-page book and charging significant funds for a book, you really do want to provide answers, at least on a basic level, because your reader expects answers in a 200-page book. That doesn't mean that it can't also serve as a lead generation book, because it will and it can. Let me see. Then the other mistake is to mismatch your book to your market. This is important strategically. If your market is corporate executives, for example, you absolutely don't want to drop a flimsy 50-page paperback book on the boardroom table. You may need to produce a hardcover book in the 150 to 300-page range to match your intended stature as a coach or consultant. So please filter the information that I'm giving you and that you get from every other source. Anything that's telling you about books, and be sure that the information is relevant to you in your marketplace. The fifth mistake you really want to avoid is not tending to the professional considerations of editing, design, and production. Please, 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 I beg you to have your book professionally edited and designed and produced. Or at least you have to learn how to produce it well. Don't rely on your cousin who is a literature major in college or your best friend who's a graphic designer, because book manuscripts and book design are specialties. There are hundreds of details that most self-publishing authors completely overlook. And then they wonder why their books are ignored. And as a professional, you should pay as much attention to the professional requirements of book publishing as you do to the other aspects of your business. I know that everybody thinks they can self-publish easily today and for free, and that is true. It's also true that you get what you pay for. If you don't care about the quality of the book that you're using to impress potential clients, the media, and existing customers, then go for it. Do it yourself. But know that you're probably not doing yourself any favors. I have heard so many stories, and I've seen this myself, speakers and consultants whose books have lots of spelling and grammatical mistakes, and their credibility just goes down the tubes. I have a marketing consultant who's told me stories of people who come to her with their book and for help marketing, and she'll read the first 10 pages and there's so much garbage in it, so many mistakes that she won't work with people. And it's just, so don't do that. Please don't do that. What happens when you have a sloppy book, people who could be your customer, could be your client, who read it, and they see all these mistakes, the first thing they think is, why would I hire somebody to help me with whatever it is you help people with if they're this sloppy in the first 10 pages of their book? I don't want them to treat me the way they treat I'm always insulted when I read books that are full of mistakes, because I'm not happy that someone has had so little regard for me that they would post something like that. You might not feel that strongly about it, but I can tell you it has an effect on people who read and say, this person just doesn't have very good quality control, so I don't want them as my consultant or helper or whatever it is you do. So please think twice before you do it all on your own, or at least consider other options. At my company, Dudley Court Press, we have a course that's designed to help folks like you self-publish a short lead gen book on your own with professional guidance. And Monique can provide you with a link to that program later. We also have a coaching program called Aspiring Author to Published Pro, and that's designed to educate and support authors of substantive books. And I think Monique has a link to that program as well. The final segment of this presentation has to do with ways to earn money from your book. So the first one is passive income. If you put your book on Amazon, for example, you might generate sales if you market your book heavily and properly, of course. Most authors do not make money from book sales. Please understand that. The point of the lead generation book is to create business, to help you get business, and you earn money from the clients that your books attract to you. And by the way, do put a price on your book. We dropped out another slide there, but I came back. I want to come back to my little steps to publishing a book that I talked about before. I put a $6.99 price on the 32-page book. And what happens with that is when I give the book away, which I do all the time, people take it as a $7 gift. That's meaningful. If I had the price of $1.99, they would not value it as highly. Just because it says $6.99 on the back, people assume it has more value. Now, there's a lot of value in this actually, but the price on the back helps people identify it as valuable. And it's meaningful, even if it's completely arbitrary. I had a friend who created a white paper for executives, which was a much better idea than a 50-page, 6x9 book. In her case, is like I said before, she didn't have enough material to have a substantive book, but she had really good quality thoughts and information for executives. So she created it as a white paper and had it nicely bound. But she wanted to put a $4.99 price tag on it. And I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. It cost twice that much just to produce each copy, but the cost wasn't as important as the perceived value. If she handed an executive a 50-page document with a $4.99 price on it, there's an incongruity there. So I convinced her to price it at $29.95. And then the whole package resonated with a sort of a sense of boardroom gravitas. It made sense that this information was worth $30. Okay, another way to make money is through speaking engagements. Of course, that's what you're here looking for. You use your book to attract attention from event planners and media. And I'm sure you all know this, but I'll mention one strategy that you can use in some cases is to negotiate the purchase of books for each attendee at your speaking engagement, paid for by the organizers. Sometimes organizers have budgets they might have a budget line for continuing educational materials. It's a budget line that's separate from their budget for speaker fees. So if you have a book, you can try to shake a little more money from their coffers by negotiating that they purchase from this other budget line copies of your book for everyone. You can't do that if you don't have a book. Consulting gigs are likely to come from serious books. So again, match your book to your market. I think, yeah, I dropped out a slide of it. I'll show you another book when I come out of the slide presentation here. Another book by one of our clients, David Kriegman. He gets consulting gigs all the time from people who find his book on Amazon. I think his book's been out there for about 6 years. It sells consistently. He didn't write it as a short lead generation book. He wrote it as a more substantive legacy book, and it brings in clients all the time. I'll show you that when we come off the slide presentation. Now, coaching programs is another way to showcase your, or you can use your book to showcase client successes or your proprietary process so that potential clients can envision themselves after they work with you. You can give them hope with the stories in your book. And business leads and sales. My friend Paul is a tax accountant, and his lead gen book is a small book focusing on real estate tax considerations in the US. He markets his book and his tax advisory services through local speaking gigs, especially to real estate agents. And the real estate agents win by becoming better agents for their clients, and then he gets referrals all day long from the real estate agents. So another idea is that sometimes people will learn about your services, but they don't have the time or bandwidth or interest in learning how to do whatever it is themselves. So your breakthrough book can lead to your do it for you or do it with you options that you offer in your business. That's part of what you'd find in my little book, Steps to Publishing a Book, if you had a copy in your hands to read. And then finally, depending on what you've created for your breakthrough book, you might be able to morph it into digital products that you can sell online. So there you have it. My thoughts on how you can create a breakthrough book that matters. There are 2 benefits for you, 6 ways to create or find the content for your book, 5 mistakes to avoid, and 7 ways to make money from your book. So I'm going to shut down the PowerPoint now and get back to the screen with you. We've got some time for Q&A, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Great. Thank you so much. Oh my God, that was like a, such a firework of hints and tips and suggestions. And, every single call I just take powerful suggestions away. So here are some questions that some people ask, just to start the question and answer round. So one question is, how do I decide, how many pages I should write to, it was specifically Doug asking for his, mentioning the suicide bullying book that he's working on. What is my recommended page count? And just to make this question a little more general, how do I decide how many pages should I write? I mean, you talked about the 2 book options, right? But maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, there are a few different considerations. It depends on, again, who your market is and what you're trying to do with your book. If you're creating a book to establish yourself as an expert with media, with event planners, to gain more speaking gigs, then you can go with a shorter book. You don't have to do a substantive book. It takes more time and more money to do a substantive book well. That just makes sense. But you can do anything between, I wouldn't go too small. The little book that I have here, the Steps to Publishing a Book, that's not something I would send to the media. That's something I hand directly to potential clients. If I do have another book called Write the Book You're Meant to Write, but that's something that's a little bigger. I don't know, it's 120 pages. I think it also depends on, well, let's see. Is this Doug that was asking about this?
Yes, it was.
So, and this is the bullying to suicide thing. And so, Doug, let me ask you: Are you wanting to write this book because you want to get speaking gigs on this topic? Is Doug there?
Yes, I do. I'm a 2-time survivor.
Okay. And I would say, unless you are a prolific writer, and I'm going to say most people are not. Okay, so then I wouldn't aim for a 200-page book. I would go for a 50 or 60-page book, and I would try the Q&A format. And you can ask the questions like, what are the signs that of someone feeling overwhelmed by being bullied? You can ask 20 or 30 questions and then pick the 10 best or 8 best or whatever it works out to, and write the answers to that. But I don't think you need to go more than 40 to 60 pages. Done properly will give you a book that you can you can send to event planners and media folks. And if it's done well, then it will establish you as an expert, a credible speaker on this topic. So you don't have to go beyond that, I don't think. Other questions?
I hope that helps. Golis was asking, what's the right timing to be in contact with a publisher after writing the book? How many months before writing the book? So I think that's a good question.
Great question. Okay. If you're looking to do a deal with a traditional publisher, the process is this. You have to find a literary agent most of the time. Most traditional publishers will not look at anything that comes in unless it comes in uninvited. So you first go looking for a literary agent. You have to find a literary agent who will accept you as a client. What you need to put together is a book proposal, and you can find online, you can find what you need to do for a book proposal. But you usually have to write a chapter and a detailed treatment of what you're going to include in the book, and then how you're going to market the book. And you do quite a lot of work to get a literary agent interested, and then the literary agent who, if they accept you, will shop your book to a publisher. That can take a lot of time, but that's how that process is done. And there's loads of information about how to do that. If you are thinking about self-publishing, of course, you're not dealing with the publisher. As a hybrid publisher, companies have different ways of operating. I can tell you my way of operating. I like to talk to people very early on, because a lot of times people spend years writing what is ultimately the wrong book. And that's heartbreaking because they think they have a book and they're finally finished with it and they show up on my doorstep. And when we have the discussion of why are you writing this book, just as I explained with Paul Golden, their book is not going to serve them in the way that they intended it to. And there are some people I've talked to where we broke the book down into 2 or 3 books because they had a 400-page book, and that doesn't make any sense in today's market. People who have combined 3 ideas in one book, and they're not combinable ideas, so they have to tear it apart and decide which book makes the most sense to lead with. There are a lot of strategic considerations. So personally, I really like to talk to people very early on. And then, you know, if it takes 2 years, we are just now publishing a book for a woman who has been in touch. We've been in touch for 3 years. And she joined my coaching program earlier this year in the first quarter and finally got her book moving forward and is now publishing it. But it took her several years to figure out, and only after a strategy consultation with me and then this other coaching program, she figured out what made sense for her and her audience. And it was very different from where she started 2 years ago.
Right. And there's another question coming up, Gail, and I think it's a question that everyone keeps asking that is, you know, writing a book, is can you say more about regular publishing and self-publishing? And I know that you're a hybrid publisher, so people might not even be familiar with hybrid publishing. So can you say more about regular publishing versus self-publishing and hybrid publishing? And
you bet. So the traditional publishers, the basic difference is they pay for everything. And they take your book, they take the rights to publish your book, and they make the decisions on how to publish it and when to publish it and where to distribute it. But they pay for everything, and they pay you a small royalty on sales. They may pay you in advance in exchange for your rights, but the days of large advances are long gone. And even for celebrity authors, the advances are so small today, if there are any at all. And getting a traditional publishing deal unless you're well connected and lucky, it can take years because of the steps you have to go through. So it's one way to publish, and people do it, but for most authors today, self-publishing is a much better deal if they do it right. And when I say if you do it right, that means following all the rules, learning all the stuff about metadata, figuring out how to market your book, figuring out the right market. And that means you have to essentially become a publisher. So if you don't want to become a publisher, you might want to work with a hybrid publisher. In self-publishing, you pay for whatever you want to pay for. If you hire a graphic designer to do your cover, you pay the graphic designer. But you have to hire the designer, you have to give guidance, you have to decide whether the cover they come up with is what you need. You know, you make all the decisions and you bear all the responsibility as a self-publishing author. There are companies called publishing services companies that will sell you packages of services. And there's a difference between those and a true hybrid publisher, which is what we are. In our case, we do charge for our services like a self-publishing services company does, but we also operate with standards like a traditional publisher does. So we don't accept every book that comes in. We have editorial standards for the books that come through us. The self-publishing services companies don't care whether your book has been edited or if they're spell checked or anything. Whatever you give them, they will publish. That's not the case with a hybrid publisher. A hybrid publisher will make sure that your book meets editorial standards. We work very hard to incorporate into our books a lot of marketing fundamentals that are a little tricky, but it's things like the metadata is all that information that is in the system out there that helps people find your book. We work very hard to include, for example, key search terms in your book description. so that when people are searching for something, your book shows up. If you don't know to do that, and most self-published authors don't, and most self-publishing services companies don't offer anything like that in terms of services. It's much more what traditional publishers do. We also work with our authors on an ongoing basis in terms of continuing opportunities. We have books going to the Frankfurt Book Fair for rights sales. We work with foreign rights representatives who sell our books into other marketplaces. So we've done a number of those rights sales. So that's income to the client. And we have bookstore distribution for some of our books. If they're of a significant, if of a sufficient quality, we can get books into bookstores. And of course, we pay royalties to the author. So we share royalties. So those are with the self-publishing services companies. The thing, if you want to go with one of those, please read your contract very carefully. Know what you're getting and know what your obligations are. Some of those companies charge a fee for their services, and then they require that you buy books at a certain price, which is usually a fairly hefty price, less than retail, but substantially over the cost of producing those books. And so that's how they make their money. And they don't care whether your book is successful or not, because they don't rely on sharing royalty income with you. So they're not supporting you as you keep going through the process. When our authors are never required to buy books from us, they can, and when they do, they buy them at just a little bit over the cost of printing. So if you're a speaker and you want 100 books to sell at an engagement, we can ship the books for you to where you're going, and you sell the books at retail, and all you pay us is the print and shipping costs. So you don't get royalties on those, but you make that's where you make your money as an author, is selling the books at the back of the room. That's the difference between traditional hybrid self-publishing services, vanity press things, and then self-publishing. That continuum. Is that helpful?
Very helpful, definitely. And I also posted the link to your video where you give a lot of additional hints and tips on how to publish in a professional way, so that people can also learn more about your program, as you mentioned it. Okay, there's another question from Lieve saying, you said don't give too many answers in a lead generation book. What do you mean exactly? If you give all the steps of a process, like you did, isn't that a lot of answers already? So maybe
great question. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very hard to give all the answers to how to publish a book in a 32-page book. You've just heard me talk about a few things here. There's so much information. So what I've given here, I've given an overview of the entire process, rather than, for example, going into depth in, how to assess your competitive position. So that's one step. And I do say, I ask a whole bunch of questions and tell you to do certain things. But all I say is, create a long 500-word bio and a shorter 50-word bio to begin using in your marketing. I don't tell you what should be in the bio. I don't tell you how to craft it. I say, what's your biggest competition? And I tell you to do a half a dozen things about those. But I don't give you any more context to that. And so there are answers. Yes, there are answers, but it's more in a way, what I'm trying to do is educate people about what's involved so that they understand the steps. But I also want them to understand that it's not as easy as they think. And to do it right, you either ignore some of these steps, or not to do it right, but to get through it on your own, you either ignore some of these steps because they're a little overwhelming to do on your own, or you hire somebody to help you with them. So does that make sense? I hope it does.
I feel that it makes a lot of sense because, you know, what you pretty much do is you outline a process to people that, you know, are pretty much starting out for the first time, right? Where they know nothing, where you are giving a lot of value, as you're saying. You outline the whole process, but you just at the same time, create and trigger more interest in learning more. Pretty much, that's what you do, right?
And you should. This is what you should do as you're writing your books. Think about, the great analogy here is I'm a tour guide, and so we're sitting in the lobby of the hotel because I'm going to take you out for a tour today, and I tell you the highlights of what we're going to do. We're going to get on a bus and we're going to go over here. We're going to see the Eiffel Tower, and then we're going to go here to lunch, and then we're going to go do this, and we're going to do that. What I don't tell you is all of the complications of certain things, or the maybe touring Paris isn't as hard as, let's say we're going to climb a mountain. That's maybe a little more, but I don't tell you, as I say, we're going to cross this little river and then we're going to do that. I don't tell you that you're going to be walking in water up to your knees and you're going to need the boots that we provide down the road, and that, that you'll need walking stick, and that at this corner, this little area here, we're going to have to go single file because there's a drop off of 1,000 feet and you have to really hug the side of the mountain. I don't tell you all of those things when we're starting out. I just give you the overview and you learn the details as you go through. I hope that that's helpful.
I love the metaphor. That's exactly, how you should be writing it. It's beautiful. Good. One more question from Gulise. How does hybrid publishing play a role in achieving, becoming a bestseller?
So let me tell you a couple of things about being a bestseller. In the United States, the New York Times bestseller list is one of the big ones. And any one of you could have a book on the New York Times bestseller list. It would need to be a substantive book, not one of the 60-page books. But you'd need to spend about $300,000 and get the right consultant, and you too could be on the New York Times bestseller list. If you look carefully, you'll see lots of books show up on that list for a week, and then they drop away, and that's because they've paid to be on the list. They don't pay the New York Times, but they pay a consultant to get the books purchased in the right places so that they're collected into the statistics that the New York Times uses to determine who's on their bestseller list. The same thing happens on Amazon. You can be an Amazon bestseller by strategically arranging for a certain number of people to buy your book at a certain point in time. We do that. We've done it. I have done that. Now, it's a little harder today, but I will tell you that I made an embarrassing book a bestseller because I figured out how to get a few people to buy it at a certain point in time. And it worked. And that happens all the time. But what happens is that you have to look at being a bestseller. It does not mean that you're selling a lot of books. What it means is that you get to call yourself a best-selling author. That's what you're doing, is strategically you're setting yourself up to be able to say Amazon bestseller or New York Times bestseller. But it doesn't mean that you have sold a book. Many of those people on the New York Times bestseller list have purchased those books with their own money. Again, done strategically through consultants who have the whole system set up. Same thing on Amazon. We do that though. We do campaigns, and most of our books are Amazon bestseller books. It's fairly straightforward today, if you know what you're doing, to get yourself listed as an Amazon bestselling book. Anybody who doesn't do that misses out on the opportunity to put a little gold sticker on their book and say Amazon bestselling book. Anybody in the know understands that it doesn't really mean very much, but it's an endorsement that you buy. So there you are. You can do a campaign for anywhere from a few $100s to a couple $1,000s to become an Amazon bestseller. Depends on who you use.
Right. And the good news is a lot of people really don't know these details. This is why, saying that, hey, I'm an Amazon bestselling author is still actually, creating quite some reputation today. Great.
But I want to say I think it's worth it because it changes how you perceive yourself as well. If you invest in a good book, in writing it well, in having it edited and professionally designed and laid out, and have the metadata correct, and you do a marketing campaign to get you to the higher levels on Amazon, you deserve some credit, because there's so many people who are just throwing, pardon my language, but crap up onto Amazon. There's so many terrible books up there. If you respect people enough to put a good book available on Amazon, then I think it's worth spending some extra money to do the work to get the campaign going to become an Amazon bestseller, so that people find your book and read it and benefit from it. Because if they can't find it, they can't benefit from it. And they will not find it unless you do a lot of great strategic marketing from the beginning. So marketing is as important as writing your book today.
Right. Okay. So I look forward to see a lot of Amazon or whatever best-selling books out there soon from our audience today. So, Leva, I know, is writing a book. Doug is writing. Gulis is writing. And I know everyone that's on this call today must have some intention or some idea of wanting to write a book sooner or later, which I do as well. And we've been working on our mySpeakerBusiness book for a long time. And Gail, you and I had quite some conversation about that one too already. So thank you so much for being here with us. Let me still open the floor. If there's any last questions to Gail at the moment, please shoot. Also, if you want to share something, some project on your side that you are working on, that you would love to get support from each other, because this is a community call. So it's great to have you, Gail, but we also want to open the doors for everyone to announce things or ask for help, or just ask anything else to Gail or to all of us. Any last questions from anyone? I know speakers.
Is it possible to get this little book from your website, or is it
this one?
Yeah.
Shoot. We're going to be running some Facebook ads starting in July to give this away as a PDF. But where are you? I could mail you a hard copy, or I could, if you can kind of give me your email address or something, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF.
Okay, thank you.
That's probably the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, now you got everyone jealous on this call. You cannot just do that. Okay.
Okay. What I will do. Can I send you a link that you can share with everyone? Would that work?
Are you happy for me to share it with everyone, or are you happy for me to share it with everyone that's been on the call today? Okay, we have a separate discussion on that, Gail, but everyone that's on this call today is going to get the PDF.
Yes, they deserve that. They came to the call.
Okay. Good.
All right.
How does that sound? Okay, I just want everyone to walk away being sad that, oh, goodness, is going to get it now. Okay. And we don't want to have any kind of intellectual property robbery going on in our community either.
No, I'm happy to, as I say, it's almost set up that, to be the free offer kind of thing, but it's not 100% set up yet.
If you're happy, I'm happy to share it within the community as an aftermath of this call, so you guys can grab it from there. Okay.
So we'll do that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good. Thank you for your generosity once more.
Happy to do that.
Cannot learn enough. Any, floor open for everyone. Any last minute questions, comments, asks for help, announcement?
Oh, I was just wondering if we would like to have some kind of, I don't know if it's the right expression, a proofread or something, or feedback about something that we have written. Is that something that we can ask here in people in the group, or?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, if you
Or
have written
Gail,
something and
or
you want some feedback, what you can always do is you can also put it into our community, leave it. That's what our community is for.
Mhm.
Hey, I've written something. Is someone willing to have a quick look and would be happy to give some feedback?
Yeah.
Of course. Can't guarantee, but you know what? I mean, we have, what, 800 people in there? There is actually a chance that someone would be willing to, you know, and if you give them a good reason why they would want to read it, I'm sure you will find several people that say, I'm happy to have a quick look because that sounds like an intriguing topic and I'd love to learn from you.
Yeah. What could be a good reason?
Well, I don't know what your book is about.
Yeah, mine has everything to do with living without stress. So
Good. So let me ask everyone here in the community, and I don't see everyone right now, but how many of you would love to live a life without stress? Okay. I think, okay, let me raise my 10 hands. Okay. I think everyone here. Okay. So if you put it out there, say, hey, you know what? If you want to get some hints on how to live a life without stress, I wrote a little book. Would you mind doing some proofreading? Okay.
yeah.
So, you know, on the proofreading side as well, and maybe Gail agrees with me or not, but I wouldn't put the whole book out. I would always just put, you know, certain chapters out, because again, the intellectual property is not secured before you haven't really published. But maybe Gail, you want to say something about that?
I do have a thought for you. I've done this, and I know I recommend it to some people, and it might work for you. Is it Leva? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Leave. Yeah.
Leva. And that is actually to create a reader group. So if you were to put out in this community and maybe some other places and ask for, you know, 10 people to be part of your reader group, and then feed them 2 or 3 chapters and get feedback. When I wrote my first book, I did that. I think I had 30 people in my reader group, but only about 6 or 8 actually actively participated. But it was fabulous because I got real-time helpful feedback on whether my message and my voice and my approach was making sense to people. And so it might be something that would be useful to create your own reader group, and their commitment is to read it for you and give you feedback. You know, and people are willing to do that, but have several people so that you know, you never know when you get somebody who has their own attitude about things, and you don't want to be bombarded with, you know, or you don't want to be affected by one person's thinking when you can have several minds, you know, sort of helping you. And then you can, you know, you can tell each of them that you'll give them a copy of the book when it's done or something like that as a thank you, and you thank them in your acknowledgments and that sort of thing.
And it's funny you're saying that, Gail, because guess what? This community got created out of this. I got to write my speaker business book, and we gave a sneak preview on, you know, a workshop, and then people said we want to have a community around that. This community started, and we did exactly that. We asked people who would like to test read some of our chapters, and we even have some test readers here on with us today. But we also just gave them 1 or 2 or 3 chapters and never the whole book. Yeah. So. Okay, I think we need to really round it off. Liv, is there something urgent you want to add?
No, I just wanted to ask one small thing with regard to what Gail just said. Thank you, by the way, it's a great tip. I was just wondering what kind of deadline you put on the proofreading.
When I did it, I asked people to respond to me within, I don't know, a couple of weeks or a month or something like that. But I also recognized that many of the people who volunteered, and as I said, I think I had 30 people who agreed to be participants, and only 6 or 8 of them ever responded. I didn't beat them up for it. I didn't make a big deal. I just appreciated those who did communicate back. And the others, you know, they sort of dribbled off as time went by. I stopped sending them things, you know, after the first 2 or 3 rounds. If they weren't responding, I just took them off my list. So I would aim for 20 or 30 people, but hoping that you get 5 to 10 that actually participate with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we gave them 2 weeks in general, and then, you know, we followed up. Yeah. Because if people don't respond within a couple of weeks, then normally they're not really into helping. Okay, I
Great.
really need to start rounding off here for Gail's benefit and ours as well. So thank you everyone for being here. And as I said, Gail and I, we look forward to see your books being written, published in a professional, powerful way, uplifting way, giving a lot of value to your readers, to all of us. And yeah, so as I said, I shared a link with all of you. So quickly grab the link from the Zoom chat so that you can watch another video of Gail's, also arrange a separate call with her if you seriously consider working with her on your book. So yeah, so Gail, thank you so much for being here with us. Do you want to say something at the end to, as a final inspiration and encouragement to go ahead?
I would like to say, if you are called to write a book, please write it. Don't wait, do it. It is hard, it's a challenge, but if you're feeling it from deep within that you have a book that needs to be written, in my view, that means that there's somebody out there waiting for your book that needs to hear it, needs to know what you have to say. And so have faith and do it.
Couldn't say anything better at the end. So thank you so much for the last encouraging words and all the hints and tips you shared with us. Thank you for the powerful work you do to really save the world of bad books and rather ensure that good books are written and published and shared with the world. So thank you every one of you that have been with us today. As I said, we really look forward to share and read and tap into your wisdom when you start writing your books. And again, keep in mind, this is a community. We have 800 amazing professional speakers and people that want to become professional speakers and are on the journey in our community. So tap into there, ask your questions, engage, inspire each other. That's what this community is there for. Don't hold back. Okay, and we look forward to have you back again next month when we have another amazing guest with us. So every month we have a guest, interview and session. And thanks for all of you for being here. And thank you, Gail, for taking the time. I know it's the morning for you. This is why we had to switch the call. And Doug is grateful because it's lunchtime for him, not early in the morning, to our American friends. So thank you so much for being here with us. And let's keep doing our magic together as we go forward. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Until soon, have a great time, everyone.